Today is Friday, November 10th, and we're going to go around the bases with our MLB insider at the New York Post. He is none other than John Heyman. John, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Ryan?
Good. I know you had a busy week this week at the GM meetings down in Arizona. Luckily, you didn't get sick like the other executives that we heard about down there, and we're happy to have you here. A lot of news came out from the Yankees and Mets, and I want to start off with the Yankees first. We know that the Yankees have said, and Brian Cashman, that they've wanted to get a left-handed outfielder for a while now, specifically a left fielder. And obviously, with the injury to Jason Dominguez, they need a center fielder as well. So when you're looking at the Yankees this offseason, is that the priority? The outfield position, maybe two guys they need, specifically left-handers?
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, Cody Bellinger is the obvious guy who's an outstanding center fielder, returned to his great form this year with the Cubs, and the Cubs are going to be the main challenge there. I do understand he liked it in Chicago, and Scott Boras did admit that when he took the stand late in the GM meetings. But obviously money talks, and that usually decides these things. His dad played in New York, won two rings in New York. Clay Bellinger as a utility player. This is not a utility player. Cubs got a great deal, about $17 million last year. He had a little bit winning the Comeback Player of the Year award, but really a great bargain for Chicago. It's not going to be a bargain this time. We're looking at probably around $200 million, maybe even more than that. He's had three superb seasons, an MVP in one, close to an MVP in another. This year, he won't probably be in the top 4 or 5, but he'll certainly be on the board. But that's the guy, I think. I mean, look, the Yankees had 226 last year. So I don't think an incremental move is really going to be the answer to this. Obviously, we'd like to see improvement from Volpe and some of the other young guys who, Volpe had a pretty good rookie year overall, but in terms of batting average, not so great. Same with the other young guys who really did not take a step forward offensively last year. So, they can hope for some progress from the guys that they already have, but the best answer, probably free agency. There are a lot of other options out there. Jung-Hoo Lee from Korea is a left-handed bat who plays center field. He'd fit. He's not Bellinger, but good player. Kiermaier, we know he's terrific defensively. He'd be a fit in center, but if you do Kiermaier, you'd have to get some offense somewhere else. The ones that are out there in terms of trades, Grisham from San Diego, very talented guy, strikes out a lot. You've got Carlson from St. Louis. St. Louis has a few outfielders to look at potentially. And, Verdugo's name came up. I saw in a report out of Boston. I think Rob Bradford had that report. Don't see too many Yankee Boston trades. I'm not counting on that one, but his name is out there.
The one guy I want to ask you about that you didn't talk about out of all those options, Juan Soto. What's the deal with him? Are the Padres actually going to trade Juan Soto, or is that just off the table this offseason?
I guess I didn't mention him, at least initially. I'm glad you brought it up, but I don't think San Diego really wants to trade him. I'm sure they'll talk about him. There'll be reports, rumors, whatever. Right now San Diego's needing to improve the pitching. The pitching was very good last year, so good that guys opted out. Lugo, former Met, as we know, has opted out. You've got Waka, who did not take his option, out. You've got Hader, the great reliever. You've got Snell, the likely or really sure Cy Young winner, who's really at the top of the free agent market. And we'll talk more about him later. But it's not really in San Diego's DNA to do this. They've basically close to selling out already this year, and they want to win. So they trade Soto. That will surprise me. I wouldn't rule it out. He's got a year to go. They're certainly going to look into a deal with him first. If they don't get a deal, maybe they'll consider it more seriously. I think the one chance for them to trade Soto really is if they're able to sign Ohtani. If they sign Ohtani, then I could see them trading Soto. And I probably will trade Soto at that point. But, I don't think they're a favorite at this moment to sign Ohtani.
Interesting stuff there, John. Very interesting stuff. Obviously, we're going to see how the Yankees attack this and where they're going to go. Bellinger, you mentioned, Kiermaier. I mean, it'd be interesting to see how they pivot and decide to attack that outfield, because that lineup is lacking balance. And we'll talk about Brian Cashman's comments in a little bit later here. But the next topic I want to talk about is the New York Mets, the other side of town. Obviously, they traded off Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander before the trade deadline last year. They thought they had a rotation last year, and now it's really just Kodai Senga and I don't know else. So when you're
We'll give
looking
him
at this,
Quintana. We'll give him
King
Quintana. He
Quintana, I
came
mean,
back at the end of the year last year, so we'll say they got two that we're pretty sure about at this point.
okay, so 2 out of 5. They
Yeah,
need some starting pitching, right? So how are the
right.
Mets going to attack that rotation and building that up this offseason?
Well, David Stearns, the new baseball president, admitted or told us that they need multiple starting pitchers, and he didn't leave it at 2. Maybe it's more. He said that teams can expect to use 10 starting pitchers over the course of the year. They're nowhere near 10 starting pitchers at this point. They've got some guys who are maybes who've shown something. Lucchesi was actually pretty good in the appearances that he did have this year. McGill has shown some flashes. He's got talent. Budo, another possibility. Then they've got some other younger guys, Vassell and some other guys. But I mean, really, they're really hurting in terms of the depth issue of starting rotation. My understanding is they're going to look for one big starter, one depth piece. I'm not going to guess at the depth piece. There's 50 guys out there who could be that depth piece. It's a very good market for starting pitchers. There's a ton out there, and they can go for almost any one of them. I'm not saying they're going to go for Bauer, for instance, whose agents were out there looking for a job. That doesn't sound like a move. I think they breathed a sigh of relief when they didn't get him the first time. I don't think they're going to do it this time. I wouldn't be shocked if somebody else did, but the big starters out there, obviously Yamamoto, they've been linked to quite a bit. Snell, top of the market guy, big left-hander, going to win the Cy Young. Nola, who's a very dependable guy from the Phillies. They were, at last report, $100 million apart. So not sure he's going back to Philly. You've got Sonny Gray, who has been good everywhere except with the Yankees. You've got Eduardo Rodriguez, guy who opted out. And, there's a decent number of guys at the top of that market. Now, they will look at Ohtani, too. And obviously, Ohtani is a great pitcher. He will not be pitching this year after the elbow surgery, but that's somebody for them to look at. We all kind of, and we're guessing here, it's reading tea leaves, that the Dodgers are the favorite for Ohtani and that he wants to stay in Southern California. Also, the Mets being at the top of the tax scale, we'll have to pay 110% tax, so $60 million salary.
What's that to Steve Cohen, right, John?
I don't know. I think it's something. When you're paying $126 million, now he obviously brings a great marketing value, excitement, and all that. And, I think they'll certainly look into Ohtani. I don't think they're going to ignore him. And maybe they end up getting Ohtani. But at the moment, at least, that doesn't solve their pitching issue. And, Yamamoto is the guy they've been linked to most. But, the Yankees are in on him, the Cubs, the Red Sox, the Cardinals, Giants, Diamondbacks, Rangers.
Almost everyone.
Yeah, basically almost anybody. Senga was such a great deal last year for $75 million. Yamamoto's not going to be 70. He's going to be a lot north of that. And in fact, he's going to probably rival Snell at the top of that market. But
and that's because of his age, right? At 25 years old.
25, that's part of it. He's obviously very athletic, poised. He's been a 2-time, I believe, MVP in Japan at a 1.22 ERA this year. He had a couple rough starts in the playoffs this year, but generally an outstanding pitcher who's 25 years old. That's a young guy. Normally these guys are around 30 when they come out. One advantage to Bellinger, he's only 28, even though this is his second time as a free agent. Nola, Snell more typically are 30 years old. So a lot of tread left in their tires, but not to the degree of a guy who's 25.
My follow-up there about Yamamoto interests. We knew that Billy Epler was there in Japan scouting him, and now Billy Epler is no longer with the team. With David Stearns running the operation, is there maybe a difference of opinion? Is Steve Cohen pushing maybe a little bit? This is a guy we really like, or maybe even someone in his own clubhouse who they signed last year, Cody Senga, is saying Yamamoto, you gotta go get him. Like, this is a guy who I think could help us a lot. How does that dynamic work a little bit now that Billy Epler is no longer running the ship over there?
Right. Well, obviously Epler has no say at this point. He did some, due diligence on it. They still have his reports. It's up to Cohen and Stearns. Stearns obviously has big say. Not only the new guy, he's completely in charge. He's not hiring a GM. He does have his coterie of assistants, but he is the man making the call. And, he just started a month ago. We're not sure how he's going to go. Whether he's going to be affected at all by Epler's reports or his own reports. I hadn't heard that Milwaukee was out there scouting him, and I wouldn't be surprised if they weren't. That's a lot of money for Milwaukee to spend. So he will certainly do his due diligence and try to figure it out. I hope it goes beyond. And Senga was fantastic, but
Yeah.
I hope it goes beyond the player. I mean, we'll talk about this when we get to the Cashman rant, but to rely on the players for scouting reports, I don't think that's always a great idea. So,
You
I
don't
know
say,
Cashman
John. You don't
did
say.
it. Yeah, relying on the writers isn't always a great idea either. Do it yourself. Don't believe us, but certainly do not believe the players in terms of, who's great in the clubhouse, who's, I guess they would know some potentially if they were in the clubhouse with a guy it's just that they're conflicted. It's
100%.
very difficult to say, exactly where they're coming from. So,
Well,
Senga was fantastic. They'll ask him, but hopefully they weigh their own reports more than that.
yeah, I only asked that because obviously, Senga was asked a little bit towards the end of the year last year. Yamamoto is expected to be posted. Would you welcome him in here to Queens? And he said, yes, of course, I would love to have him. So
all right,
that's the only reason.
This is kind of like the on the record opinions of the new manager, Carlos Mendoza, right? I saw a lot of stories. He's going to be great. They said this guy, he's going to be great. Who's going to come out and say he's going to stink?
Right.
Nobody. So to me, the value of those stories is nil. They're friends of his. They were on the staff with him. If it's going to be negative, they'll likely decline comment. It's a new guy. I'm the only one who's going to say something negative, which is that, the Mets have not had a good record hiring rookie managers. So I'm a little concerned. Willie Randolph was good. Davey Johnson was fantastic. The other 20, 30, whatever they had, rookie managers, not good. So hopefully David Stearns did better than the others, but we'll see.
We'll see. The reason, again, I asked you about David Stearns and his philosophy is because he has another big thing. That's other topic I want to talk about. Pete Alonso, the guy that's already on his roster, entering the final year before he enters free agency in 2020, after the 2024 season. We heard Scott Boras speak about the contract negotiations are not in hibernation, so you're making a polar bear reference. So when you're looking at the Mets, do you see them? I know there's reports of could they trade him? Could they keep him until the trade deadline and then trade him? Or will they ultimately give him a contract extension? Or will Pete just wait until free agency to get a contract? It's a very tricky situation. But what is your feel right now with David Stearns and after Scott Boras' comments this week?
Yeah, I'm going to take David Stearns at his word that they're not likely to trade him. They are receiving some interest from other teams. Not a surprise, as Stearns said. He's got a year to go. He's a star player. But, you're going to trade him with a year to go. You're not really going to get the right value for him. So he has said appropriately that he expects him to be their first baseman at the start of the year. I think that would be a funny way to come in. Maybe if he'd been here 10 years and done a bunch of stuff, you could maybe consider that a little more carefully. But, I just don't see David Stearns trading Pete Alonso. The Mets do want to be competitive this year. We talked about how they're going to try for one big pitcher. You don't try for a big pitcher if you're, really just writing the year off. So you trade Alonso, to me, you're probably writing the year off because you get prospects back. You're probably not improving the team this year. In terms of the contract, I don't see it happening. Scott Boras said they're open and listening, but the Mets have made offers. I'm sure they're closer to the Freeman offer or the Freeman contract, which was, I think, 6 for 162, but there was a lot of deferrals on that. So it really wasn't even 162. You had Goldschmidt out there at 130. Those are the recent star first base contracts. Scott Boras doesn't want to even consider those contracts. He wants to go back a decade and talk about Teixeira's 180, Prince Fielder's 214. It is funny that the great first baseman, the contracts have actually gone backwards. I'm not sure why that is. It hasn't really happened in other areas. Certainly pitchers' values have gone way up. So I think it's going to be difficult for them to get on the same page. David Stearns mentioned how his talks with Scott Boras are a little bit different, and they're talking about different players now, that he's not with Milwaukee, the 30th market, he's with the number 1 market. So he is able to talk about other players, but with 1 year to go for Alonso, I think we're probably looking at a Judge type situation where he's
playing out the final year.
Maybe they bring him back at that point, but that's the more likely scenario.
It's just that careful player comp that you're going with. You talk about Freeman, you talk about Goldschmidt. These are high average guys. They impact Also, they're MVPs. They're almost Gold Glove candidates. Goldschmidt's won a Gold Glove. I mean,
Right.
Pete's just not there defensively, if we're being honest, comparing the
Right.
type of player. But,
No,
Pete has
no.
next level power that those guys probably don't have. Maybe Matt
Right.
Olson you could compare now with the numbers he put up this previous season, but
Right.
it's a tough, like you said, the
Yeah.
first base market has come back down now compared to what it was
Well,
10,
Olson's a
15 years
little
ago.
different because he was on Oakland and he was
Right.
going to his hometown team and a great team and getting out of Oakland. Now, I'm sure he liked playing in Oakland and they were pretty good for a while, but I mean, it was a situation where they're all not quite disbanding, but they're basically going to go down to the worst team in baseball. And it was a great situation. So he took 168 million for 8 years. He had 2 years to go also.
Mhm.
So I'm leaving that one out because Freeman was a free agent.
Yeah.
Goldschmidt was a year from free agency. I think it's fair for the Mets to bring those up. If
100%.
Pete wants to ignore them, that's fine. Yeah, I mean, Pete is a terrific slugger. Is the value of a terrific slugger as high as it is for Freeman and Goldschmidt, who are all-around players, don't have the power that Pete has? Beauty's in the eye of the beholder, I guess. I mean,
Yes.
I would say to me, Freeman is probably the best of the 3
I
players.
agree.
Goldschmidt's probably the second best. I would still put Pete third. That's no knock on Pete.
No.
He's a great player. He's an incredible slugger. He's hit more home runs than anybody since he came in the league. I think that's by a fair amount too. But I get it if the Mets don't want to go back to the Prince Fielder deal. That didn't work out so great either.
No.
I do think Pete has big value though, because very popular, homegrown. He has improved defensively and arguably the top slugger in the game. So, if I'm Pete, I want to throw out those 2 deals too, and just do your own deal and use your own comps that you want to use.
No,
He's in
100%.
good position. He's got only a year to go, so he can
Yeah,
become
it feels
a free agent.
for me and the outsiders are looking at it, it feels like he's trying to get that Aaron Judge type of deal because he is a slugger like Aaron Judge. But Aaron Judge is also an amazing outfielder, an amazing runner of the bases. Like it's
Yeah,
interesting.
he's not Aaron Judge. I mean, Aaron
Right.
Judge is arguably the best player in baseball.
Right.
You really couldn't make that case for Pete Alonso at this point. Pete Alonso's a great player. He's
Yeah.
not Aaron Judge.
Yeah, no, it's again, I'm fascinated to see how this situation plays out if he does go for that final year and just plays it out and then hits free agency. All right, John, the big thing I want to talk to you about. Brian
I know, I
Cashman.
didn't get to write about this. Was mostly the Joel Sherman subject.
Listen, if you haven't listened to Joel and John on the show, you have to listen to the podcast wherever you get your podcast from. It's a great episode. They broke down the entire Brian Cashman rant. That took over the entire GM meetings, it feels like, John. And I know you've been covering the Yankees for a long time. You've been covering Brian Cashman for a long time. You've known him for a long time.
Yeah.
Have you ever, this is the initial question, have you ever seen anything like that before from him? Maybe behind the scenes, you've seen Brian Cashman like that, maybe like off the record, but on the record, in front of cameras, have you ever seen that?
Yeah, I don't recall that in front of cameras, but it was pent up for a month, right? He hadn't said anything for a month. It was very bizarre. They hadn't even announced that Boone and Cashman were back, although we knew Cashman was back because I saw him there at the GM meetings, and obviously Boone was out back as well. I've known him for a long time. Behind the scenes, he can be kind of feisty, which I don't blame him. I understand it. I think he's been over-criticized by the fans. I mean, obviously, he's on a bad run the last 2 to 3 years. The transactions have not been good, which was a major contributing factor to the disastrous, is the word that he used, disaster of a season last year, going 82 and 80. So I get the criticism. It's a tough job. I do think it's a little bit beyond what it should be. Obviously, to me, the defense is that he's had 22 to 23 really good years before the last couple of years. That's the defense. He didn't say that defense. His defense was a little different. I'll say this going forward. I will say this as an overriding theme. I would say the style, I don't mind. The general idea of defending the workers, all of his employees,
right?
His analytics people, even the processes. I don't mind that. I get it. I mean, he's got to defend it, right? Because what have they done? They haven't not doing anything.
They're not changing.
Announced that they did.
They're not changing.
They brought in this outside entity, Zealous, and
who was recommended by the lead analytics guy, right?
Right. So obviously that was a conflict of interest right there. Hal said right there he was recommended by Mike Fishman, who was the top analytics guy. So they're obviously not going to get rid of the guy who got them the job, right? He got them employed by the
Right.
Yankees. He's not going to be in trouble, and probably his people aren't going to be in trouble either. And that was the concern of the Yankees. Are they leaning too heavily toward analytics? Cashman thinks no, that they're balanced. They brought in Manaea and Sabian, all these old school baseball people, but people even in their organization said to me, but it's a matter of who you listen to in the end.
Yes.
Who's the one who makes the final judgment that you trust? And it does seem like they have listened a lot, from my perspective, to the analytics people lately. And it's great that Omanaya and Sabian and Hendry and all these others are in the organization, but hopefully they are going to listen to them if they haven't done as much listening as they could. They have done some listening. I mean, Hendry was obviously the LeMahieu guy. He brought him to the Cubs originally, big connection at LSU. So there are some moves you could see tied to some of these old school baseball people. But by and large, over the last 2 or 3 years, I do think they were a little too over-reliant on the analytics people. So I do think that's a fair criticism. My takeaway, beyond the fact that I don't mind his style and I don't love the substance,
you mean when you got the rile out of him? Because the question that you asked was the moves that you made of recent, because this is what got him to say we're pretty effing good at what we're doing at our job.
Is that right? I didn't know that.
You were the one that got you were the one that got that response.
I get that kind of response from people somehow. I don't know what it is about me. I didn't even notice.
But you were right in asking him, because you even preempted the question with, listen, you've been doing this for a long time. You've had a lot of success doing this job. But as of recent, you brought up the last 2 or 3 years, the moves that you've made have not worked out. And you were right to question that. But then for him to fire back and say, we're pretty effing good at our job, after you admitted that you had a disaster of a season, it feels like it's contradicting itself. And to your point, it does feel like an over-reliance on the analytics part of all this. Because, again, you alluded to earlier, you went to a guy like Rougned Odor to get an opinion on Joey Gallo. And we keep hanging up on the Joey Gallo move. It was the wrong move. We all knew it was the wrong move. It was an analytics move. But it wasn't the right decision because you went with the analytics instead of looking at the scouts and looking at the actual player itself and saying, this isn't a guy who hits very well. Like it's not going to work out well.
I just don't think he was good for New York. And I think there were people who knew that. They just didn't find them. I mean, when I talked to Cashman the next day, he said there were other people beyond Odor that they asked. But I mean, the fact that they asked Odor, the fact that they asked Swisher about Boone, are they really asking the right people? What could Swisher? He's in the organization, he's friendly with Boone. Is he really going to? The odds of Boone coming back are pretty strong to begin with. Is he really going to take a chance on saying something negative about Boone, even if he thinks it? Which I doubt it, because I've never heard anything but cheerleading out of Swisher myself. I'm not close to him, but you've got to go deeper than that, than asking Nick Swisher or Rougned Odor about Gallo. I mean, that, he says they did talk to other people, but that was the example that he used. He at the time, at least I heard it from him, and I heard it from somebody else with the Yankees. He also said that it wasn't just the analytics people on board with Gallo. They all kind of agreed, but he was an analytics darling. And I do think, even though I wasn't in the room, those analytics people seem very enthused about the Gallo signing, and they think he's great, and the WAR this and all this other numbers that they can cite. He really, beyond the fact that he wasn't good in New York, and New York was not the place for him, which I think they could have found that out somehow. Yes. I mean, I think there was word out that he's not a great baseball player. I mean, even if he's putting up his numbers when he's doing great, and he's hitting 30 home runs, and he's not hitting 150, he's hitting 210 or something with the 30 home runs and walking a lot. He doesn't, he's not Derek Jeter. He's not doing the little things. He's not doing the little thing. He may look good to the WAR number. I don't think it's really showed what Gallo was. And I feel bad about picking on Gallo. The subject is really Cashman. It's Rodon. It's Montas. Injured players. It's the injuries that keep going.
IKF.
Yeah,
these moves don't work.
He's on a losing streak. I pointed this out. I think it is fair to point out, though, that he's had a terrific career. He's won 4 titles as the general manager. I do think the fans are overlooking that. It is difficult.
Were those teams built by him or Gene Stick Michael?
Yeah, he was there. I don't know. I have to give him credit. He
I
was
know.
the general manager for those championships, right? For the four. I'm not going to give him
Right. So
96.
that was
The
the late
general manager
90s
of
and
that
early.
team was Watson, and I will say that Michael was the key there. But you're going now 2 years later. Yeah, I got to give Cashman the credit
Okay.
for that.
Yeah. I mean,
I know the fans are all over him, but I do think he's had a great career. It is difficult to fill this job appropriately. I think the Mets did a great job with David Stearns. Of course, they paid him top dollar, which they needed to do to get him, to be sure. It's not easy to fill that role and to fill it well in New York. And, I just think he's got a job for life. Hal seems to consider him like a brother. And I do think, let's not lose sight of the fact that he's had a great career, but the last 3 years have not been good in terms of the transactions, the moves that were made. And, it feels a little weird that the Yankees made a big deal about bringing this outside entity and how they had these meetings in which there was so much back and forth.
Well, your owner said the
Arguments,
changes were coming.
Who won the argument, the back or the forth? I mean, who argued to do nothing? That was the ones who won, apparently, because nothing was done. If they cite the fact that Sean Casey decided to leave and Carlos Mendoza got a job with the Mets as the moves they made, they've done nothing because those are not their decisions.
Exactly. And when your owner comes out and says, we're going to have big changes coming preemptively before the meetings. And then we see that these changes are just guys leaving the organization to either just, I don't want to do this anymore or take another job. That's not a change. That's not and that feels like a Cashman won in that argument of we're not going to change anything. And I get it. You and Joel had a great comp to this. This is like running a hedge fund. You have 23 years of success or 22 years of success. You have one really bad year. Are you going to let go of those guys that are already running that operation?
Right. That's a good defense. I think that was Joel's. And that's a good defense for Cashman. You're not going to let go of somebody who had one year like this. But it has been, now we're at 3 years. I think we're almost at the 3-year level here.
So the way I think about it, the last couple of years that you and I think you make great points about this is there's a cologne that's masking the stink right now. What's built on this roster? If you want to give Garrett Cole a good, that was a great signing. It was, but you dragged out the Aaron Judge contract negotiations last year. You, in my opinion, made a bit unbalanced lineup. We talked about this, all right-handed. You ignored left-handers, and you chased that issue by trading for a guy like Joey Gallo and going to get Anthony Rizzo because you knew you made mistakes in building that roster. And you've told us for 2 straight off seasons you've needed a left-handed left fielder, and you haven't gotten one. And then you said you misjudged the market. The market's a little tough. The other teams are asking for more prospects than we want to give up to acquire some of these pieces. And it feels like excuse after excuse after excuse. And the process that we use is defending all of our moves. I don't know, man. It feels like all the pressure is being pushed on Brian Cashman this year to get it right, because the way you came out swinging after waiting a month after the season, and you came out and fire in front of all of you guys, the media, going after you, the critics.
Right.
Now the pressure's on, man. You got to.
The pressure is always on. Yeah, the pressure is always on, and I think he does have a pretty thick skin, but I think he hit a boiling point, and there's one or two writers that are uniformly positive, but for the most part, I think we told it like it is the last couple of years, and it has not been very pretty. And you could say, well, we went after Castillo first, didn't get him. Well, somebody else got him. Okay. And then so we went for the second guy. Well, doesn't mean that the second is only slightly below the first guy, right? There could be a big gap between 1 and 2. Judge, the thing being dragged out, you could say, well, they should have offered more than, what was it, like 220 million or something like that. They should have offered 275 and gotten it done. That would have saved them, $90 million. Okay. I don't care about their money. So it doesn't bother me. He's back with the team. I'm not going to give them a negative on that one. I think Judge might, because he didn't like the fact they announced the deal, but we knew what it was anyway. And I think his perception is that other people drove it more than Cashman to give him that final push. That Hal was really the one who did that. And that may be fair.
And then the perfume that covered up the 99 win season, right? 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Judge had one of the most historic offensive seasons ever. And if you didn't have that from Judge, let's say Judge had a regular year, which is 45 home runs and 100 plus ribbies. there's a good chance you don't make the playoffs that year, or you don't win the division at least, and you make the wild card. And
Right.
it feels
Yeah, it
you're
was a
ignoring
funny
the bigger
99
issue.
wins too, because the first half of the year looked like they were going toward 120
Right.
wins, and they were very mediocre in the second half.
Right.
So they've been mediocre now for a year and a half. So
Yep.
you wonder how they're going to improve. These processes, if they did change something, I think they've made some things that they haven't really said because maybe they're embarrassed. It sounds small, right? They did mention they're going to look at bunting a little bit more, right? They mentioned that. There's probably some other things that
The
they're
Bronx
gonna,
bunters.
yeah, they're probably going to do a couple things like that, which I don't blame them. I like to see if some of these guys can bunt. We saw Arizona do it very successfully,
Right.
and they got to the World Series. I don't think they did it with the bunting, but doesn't hurt if you can be more diverse. And that's another issue that has come up. The scouts are saying that the players just go for home runs in the minor leagues, that they're taught the launch angle. Cashman will dispute that also.
Bitter
but
boy.
we'll see. I mean, Dominguez looked good in the week that he was there. Wells looked pretty good.
He did.
The other guys haven't looked as good, and they have good minor league numbers, but it's different in the minor leagues. If you're just going for homers, you'll once in a while face some bad pitching. In the major leagues, other than maybe Oakland, they all have good pitchers, so it's a little bit tougher. I mean, I hope they change more than Sean Casey deciding to leave and Carlos Mendoza getting the promotion as the Mets manager. I think there is a little bit more. I'm not sure why they didn't lay that out. I think they probably should have had a message where this is what we've done. Maybe it didn't sound like a lot, but right now it looks like to most people, they think of it, Sean Casey left and Carlos Mendoza left, and that's it.
I hear you.
I think they could have said a little bit more than that, and I think the defense for Cashman is that he's had a great career.
Correct.
And they still have all winning seasons for almost 3 decades at this point.
Yes.
So there is a defense for him. I did like his feistiness. I did like him protecting his guys, but not the substance. I think we're still questioning until we see exactly. The proof is in the pudding. We'll see.
Amen.
Come April.
John, you're the man. I appreciate you just talking to me and giving your perspective on all of this stories. New York, obviously, baseball took over a little bit on those GM meetings, especially with Brian Cashman. But appreciate you as always going around the base with us, man, and just going over the top stories.
It is funny that the Mets hired a manager and the Yankees just dropping an F-bomb or two is the top story. But that's life.
That is life. Thank you, John.
All right. Thank you.